This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas, and we have a great guest today. One of my favorite persons, Congressman Jodey Arrington, who in only his fourth term is chairman of the Budget Committee. And with that, there's a lot of glory, and with it, there's a lot of heartache, a lot of hard work. But Jodey, thanks for being here, and we appreciate all you're doing. He's also on Ways and Means Committee, which handles almost all legislation that comes along, handles Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all health-related items, all trade, Social Security, everything like that. And so, I mean, that's a committee that when I got on it improved your personality. People call you that
it's
never
amazing.
would returned the call before. But Jodey, thanks for being on the program.
It's an honor to be with you and follow in the huge footsteps of my friend and mentor, Ken Hance, the pride of Dimmitt, Texas. I don't ever know what to call you, chancellor, senator, congressman, chairman. I mean, you've held about every leadership role at the state level and for our great United States. So I've learned a lot from you. I'm grateful that that God put me alongside of you when we served at Texas Tech.
Well, we were able to do a lot of things for Texas Tech, and we came in and enrollment was a little over 25,000. We set a goal to make it 40, and Dr. Skuvenak, Dr. Bailey, and a lot of people have really worked on that, and Chancellor Mitchell, and they're at 41 now, and probably go to 42 this fall. And so they're growing and will continue to grow. Let's talk about your background. You're from Plainview, and I know your parents and everything, but tell the audience a little about your parents and their background and how they met.
Well, the most important part of their background is that they met at Texas Tech. My dad played basketball for Tech back in the late 50s. In fact, Gerald Myers, one-time athletic director and head coach, was his roommate. And my mom was from Austin. My dad was from Paladera High School in Amarillo,
Paladera
Texas.
Dons won state championship the first year that they were ever there.
That's exactly right.
They opened the doors and won the state championship.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so they met, had a great experience at Texas Tech. So our roots run deep here in Raider Nation, and pretty much didn't have a choice where I was going to go to school as a result, but it all worked out really well for me. But yeah, mom and dad then moved eventually to West Texas, where my dad sold tractors and basically had the same footprint in his sales territory as I have in my congressional district.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And then you graduated from Plainview High and came to Texas Tech.
Proud Plainview Bulldog, home of Jimmy Dean, the Sausage King and country music singer, and Leah K. Lyle, who was Miss Texas. That was a big deal. Had a big billboard out there, let everybody know that the prettiest girl in Texas was from Plainview. And
her dad was a lawyer up there.
That's
nice
exactly
people.
Right. Oh,
nice
the
people.
Lyles were the best. Like a lot of small towns, you get to know everybody, and everybody has a little piece of investing in your life. So when I look back, if I've had any success, I got to say it all starts with good parents and the values that they I would say imposed on me, but now I embrace them because I see the wisdom in it. And my coaches and teachers and the leaders of my community. And so, yeah, I'm very proud to be from a small farming community, and I'm especially proud to be a West Texan.
Well, we're glad that you're representing us in Congress. After you graduated from Tech, you got a master's in
That's
public
right.
administration.
Yes, sir. I got my degree in political science. It was, in fact, my first government class as a sophomore at Plainview High School. My teacher was Miss Becky Taylor, and she just made politics come alive in the classroom. And of course, the great Ronald Reagan was our president. And
right.
I think the confluence of her and Reagan and my dad throwing his boot at the television set every night when he listened to the news, it made me appreciate the importance of politics in the day-to-day life of regular Americans like my family, middle-class family in Plainview, Texas. And here my dad was exercised about what was going on in our nation's capital. And of course, Reagan made us all so proud and to be Americans and to believe that we were an exceptional country and that we would defeat any enemy that stood against us at that time.
In any aspect.
In any aspect. And so, as Ted Cruz says about my generation, our generation, we were part of Reagan's children, and he inspired a generation to want to serve and contribute in political leadership. And then I went to Tech, got a political science degree because I thought if I'm going to be in politics, I ought to get a political science degree. I didn't know any better. And then got a master's here. But my education started when I left Texas Tech to work for George W. Bush. And that really opened the door for me in this business. And I had a front row seat to the reality of being a leader, the ups and downs, the challenges, and just a good guy who was a great leader for Texas and was the right guy for the right time during 9/11 and post 9/11 as a
He
president.
was a good governor and an excellent president. What now? Your first job with Governor Bush was working for Clay Johnson in personnel.
Well, my first job was to work for the ombudsman, which I thought was Latin for "you get to meet with the crazy people," because that's really what I ended up doing.
Is.
So. I did that as my sort of internship to complete my master's at Tech, but I guess they felt so sorry for me after meeting with all these folks that they gave me a job working for Clay Johnson, who was President Bush's roommate at Andover and at Yale, so very close friends with the president, which opened up the door for me to have a closer relationship with then Governor Bush. And then led to me working in the White House the first year. But I met with then Governor Bush every week, and my job was to recommend appointments to various boards and commissions because we don't have a cabinet form of executive government in Texas. They call it a weaker form of executive government. He appoints boards of regents. He appoints health boards, criminal justice. They hire the executive, but people are policy, and your team's going to dictate your success ultimately. So I felt like I had an important job for then Governor Bush.
When he got elected president, did you go? You went to Washington.
I did,
and you were in the director of personnel's office. You were the number 2 guy.
My portfolio was ag, energy, interior, EPA, basically all the natural resources, ag, and environment. And if you remember, Governor Whitman from New Jersey was the head of EPA.
Right.
The California gal named Ann Veneman was Secretary of Agriculture, Gail Norton of Interior. So I worked with them to populate the political boxes called undersecretaries, deputy secretaries, assistant secretaries, basically their org chart.
You have over 4,000 appointees that a president has. And lots of presidents never get around to filling all of them.
We moved, I think, as quickly as any administration. I credit Clay Johnson for that. He was the governor's appointments director and then did the same thing effectively for the governor when he was president. And you got to get the people in place or you're going to fall behind. I mean, there are lots of ways that the bureaucracy and the system will slow down or wait you out, and then you don't end up accomplishing all that you set out to accomplish. I think President Bush was an exception to that, and we got really good people from all around the country who believed in him and believed in our common cause and our policy goals. And like I said, I think God is just wiser than all of us, and he was the right guy to be at the helm of our country during 9/11. And I got to be in the White House and watch him respond to that, and it was pretty surreal.
Where were you on 9/11?
I was in the White House. I was interviewing somebody for a political job, and my assistant came in and said, "Turn on the TV." There was a plane that hit the World Trade Center. And then things started spiraling from there. The last time she came in, she said, "There's a plane heading for the White House. We got to get out." And so we all ran out of the building, got in my Tahoe at the time, and drove as far away from the center of the city as we could. But like I said, surreal. You could see the smoke billowing up from the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And it just felt like we were under siege. And in fact, we were in some respects. But life's never been the same in our country. But I'll say this about President Bush. His commitment from that point forward and his total focus as commander-in-chief was to make sure that never happened again on his watch. So it's easy to look back, criticize him for various things, but at the time, that was his mission. And I can't imagine it being anything less than that for any other commander-in-chief. And he was successful because it never happened again. But we'll always be reminded that we have to be vigilant to protect ourselves against the enemies of America.
I visited with him in the Oval Office in August, less than a month before that happened. And he said, "This is the greatest job." And I mean, everything was going well, and there were, a few problems, but nothing like that.
Oh, man.
And I was glad that he was at the helm when that happened. Now, one of the persons you met along the way, and one of the persons y'all appeared to approve and seek out, was Don Powell, who was a friend of the governor's, and y'all appointed him to a position, and then you later wound up in working with Don.
That's right. He was the chairman of the A&M Board of Regents, appointed by then Governor Bush, and then he was tapped to be the chairman of the FDIC, our nation's deposit insurer, and also a bank regulator. And he'd never lived outside of Amarillo. He's actually a Palo Duro Don himself and knew my dad. He was much younger, but we just connected. He felt, I think, a little bit lost as a West Texas boy in the big city for the first time. He's a tremendous person, a great leader. I learned a whole lot from him.
He's excellent.
He's top-notch.
Yeah.
And he's a kind of do the right thing kind of guy. He's got a lot of guts, a lot of grit. And anyway, I served as his chief of staff at the FDIC for 4 or 5 years. It's a great country when you can ascend to the role of chief of staff when you couldn't even balance your checkbook or didn't understand,
and didn't know what a chief of staff was.
FDIC, what that stood for.
FDIC, what's that?
He trusted me, and he obviously we had good chemistry. He knew where I was from. He knew my values, and he knew I had good relationships with the president and the White House, and that's kind of what he sort of banked his confidence on me when he hired me, and it worked out really well. But we moved from there when this was a random event that occurred, but it was the biggest domestic crisis that we've suffered through, at least at that point, when Katrina and Rita hit and just totally decimated parts of the Gulf Coast, including New Orleans, which was underwater. It was so unprecedented. The president had to tap somebody to sort of be the czar to coordinate the federal government's efforts to support the states and the local communities as they rebuilt, and he tapped Don Powell to do that, and I went over to be his deputy in that endeavor, which was, again, a unique opportunity.
Trying to rebuild New Orleans and the surrounding area.
Huge.
It was a big deal.
It was, and I think they're better, stronger in those communities as a result. Haley Barbour was exceptional. Can't say the same.
Haley Barbour was the former governor of Mississippi, and he was always on top of things.
He was,
and he did a good job. Mississippi got hit hard. A lot of people didn't realize that. Most of the publicity was coming out of New Orleans, but he was great. I love watching you and Don Powell work with him. Y'all got things done. In Louisiana was trying to figure out what to do when y'all had already accomplished everything in Mississippi. They still were lost.
The political landscape and leadership in Louisiana was a stark contrast to their neighboring state in Mississippi. Just to keep it mild for your listeners, Mayor Ray Nagin ended up going to prison. So that should tell you something.
He was mayor of New Orleans.
And, we did the best we could to work with him and the state leadership, but it was really the business leaders of that state and of New Orleans that I think drove the success of their rebuilding efforts in the long run. But the best thing that came out of that for me is I met my wife, who is from New Orleans, and we have 3 wonderful, beautiful kids.
Anne's a great wife and a great person. And how old are your kids now?
14, 12, and 10.
14, 12,
boy,
and 10.
Girl, boy. And I trade both boys for that girl any day. For the record.
Yeah. You know, I always thought I had a son and wanted another son, and then got a daughter, and any father that doesn't have a daughter has been cheated.
Completely.
After you were still at the FEMA when we got connected.
Yeah.
And I persuaded you to leave FEMA and come down and be chief of staff at Texas Tech for the chancellor. And you did a great job organizing things, and you worked with some good people. We had some good people. Linda Steele,
oh, man.
You know, she was a mainstay.
Totally.
She knew what was important, what wasn't. She was a good gatekeeper. And if somebody changed, you know, she had a kind of a rule that if somebody showed up and they brought people with them and they hadn't told her, she'd make them reschedule.
Man.
You know, she wanted to make sure it was done right.
Well, she knew that's what you expected, quite frankly. I mean, what I learned from that experience is, once again, leadership matters. And the person at the top, while they can't accomplish what they want to accomplish without the team, they set the tone. They set the tone. They build the culture. And I think one of the things that is difficult in government and at a public university is to have a sense of urgency, to move, to push, to execute. And your motto was push, push, push. And anybody that's ever worked with you, totally understands that. You expect that the grass doesn't grow and that we work while the sun is shining, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen.
I think in government, higher education, and other aspects of government, if you don't push, it won't get done.
No.
And somebody always wants to create a committee, and I've always said a committee is nothing more than a cul-de-sac for a good idea. It'll get down there and die.
That's right.
And you have to be pushing on it. And we kept our goals, one, to get at Texas Tech to 40,000 by 2020, to get to 10,000 at Angelo State by 2020. To raise $1 billion.
That's right.
To increase our research, and
which was doubled under your tenure.
Is doubled, but what we did, that your job was to implement that and make sure it was happening.
That's right.
And you knew everybody in the university, and I think it was a great experience for you, and it was great for Texas Tech.
Oh, it was, if not the best, one of the best experiences of my career, and personally gratifying, because like a lot of Texas Tech alum, I just loved my experience here. The friends I made were friends for life, and the history with my parents meeting here, my dad playing ball, it was like Christmas every day. And it was an honor and a privilege to give back to making this university and the university system better than when we found it. And obviously your vision of growing the university, becoming a Tier 1 university, you established a research fund for Texas Tech at the state level. I mean, all the things that I look back that we were able to accomplish was extraordinary. But we had everybody grabbing a hold of the rope and pulling, and everybody understood the expectation was we didn't wait till tomorrow to get on that list of things that we had to do in order to make Texas Tech's star rise. And so one of the greatest experiences I've had, and it's influenced me and actually prepared me to be a good congressman, an effective congressman for this district. I don't think I would have been ready with all the great experiences I had and all the wonderful mentors I had. Don Powell, obviously George W. Bush, and all the great people that he surrounded himself with, Joe Albaugh and Karl Rove. But I needed to be under your leadership, Chancellor, and that sort of extra level of push and execution has made all the difference in my tenure, my short tenure in the U.S. Congress. That highway, I-27, the only other than I-35, north-south, 4-lane federal highway exists because you taught me push. Get in the getting cotton back in the Farm Bill so that we didn't lose the entire cotton industry.
Push. You did that your first year, and it was remarkable. It was going to be a long shot, and you worked on that night and day. Night and day. You realized how important it was.
Failure wasn't an option, and there are a lot of forces that will resist change. And as you said, at the end of the day, it's the one that gets up every day and fights the hardest, stays the longest, and push. And again, it's allowed me to have some level of success for the people I represent. So I'm grateful for that.
One thing that was very important, I moved you over to as Vice Chancellor for commercialization of inventions and things like that. You did a great job over there. That's a job of finding our professors that do research, that invent things. How do you commercialize that? And you really got that office moving, and that's important in the economy of this area. But also, they'll come up with ideas and things that you'd never thought of. Mindy Brashear, one of our professors, and she worked during the first Trump administration, but she had a method to make sure that there were no germs or no foreign substance in meat and things like that, that she explained to me how it worked. Now, I just went, okay. Exactly. I had no idea. But she did a great job. And you were helping on things like that to get it commercialized so that the person could make money and the school could make money.
Well, the focus of a public research university should be to do research and other endeavors that will make an impact on the public good, on society. And I think too often research universities that are less practical than Texas Tech do things that are so obscure and so academic that they don't have any real value. You got to question, like, why are we wasting tax dollars on this? Texas Tech was very tied into the real world, tied into industry, especially in the ag and engineering space. And so it was a lot of fun to identify innovations and technologies that came out of the research that had a practical application to solving some problem. Mindy Brashear's in food safety. We had new technology in wind engineering that would make the turbines more efficient to produce more efficient energy. We had a number of things from the hard sciences and engineering, like pulse power, to the life sciences, whether it was ag or it was the medical school. I mean, we were using the immune system and turning on proteins within the human body to attack cancers. And those things you can patent, you can license them to a bigger operation, you can have startup companies. It was exciting. It gave the students here an opportunity to see what entrepreneurship and innovation and startups and that experience is like. And we did some good things. We made some big pops along the way, but it all started with that administration. We didn't really have one. Stanford was sort of the model, and they were the Silicon Valley. We called ours the Project Silicon Prairie. And I think it's paid dividends, and I think some of the professors would tell you that.
I went to visit with the president at Stanford about what they were doing, and he was on the board. They were doing the Yahoo people were doing research out there, and they put him on the board. And then they went public and everything, and he cashed out his position, made $38 million. And he asked me if the board had ever done anything like that for me. And I said, they gave me an abandoned FINA station in Kittaway that, I didn't serve on any board of something that went big time. Let's talk a little about your political career.
Yeah.
You got into a race that was a tough race.
Yes, it was.
And you lost. And then you got into a race that was a tough race, and you won. And you learned a lot from that first campaign, and that's when you ran for state senate.
Yeah. I just left Tech as vice chancellor, your vice chancellor for research and commercialization. And we had an opening because the new chancellor was Robert Duncan, who was our senator at the time. And I thought, look, this is my opportunity to get involved in political leadership. That's something that's always been in my heart since the Miss Becky Taylor days and the Ronald Reagan era. But and I really believed after praying about it that it was the right thing for me to do. Now, when I lost, I wondered why in the world did I ever endeavor to do something against an incumbent at the time who had a lot more name ID. I didn't appreciate how difficult it is to get name ID. I thought because of my time as your vice chancellor and getting to know so many people in this community that I would have an advantage. But it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money and a lot of discipline to get there. But I just know now that I was supposed to do that because God was laying the groundwork for me to run for. Well, number one, I learned what it took to be a good candidate, and nobody knows that. You can listen to advice, you can read all
books, but until you've done it,
you got to get in the arena and get your nose bloody, and got to go home and some nights curl up in the fetal position, say I ain't going back out there, and. But you got to do it, and that experience prepares you actually to serve when you get into those positions. But I ran against a great candidate in Charles Perry. We've become great friends. So I learned a lot from him. Glad I had good, solid competition. But I also had an organization. Running a campaign is like a startup. And, we only had a few months. It was a special election. But having all that infrastructure, having those relationships, knowing what it took to raise money to move that name ID to a place where you could be competitive, I started in a very different place when Randy Nagelbauer decided he wasn't going to run again. I could hit that switch. I could take all those experiences and I could build that.
How long was it between the race where you ran for state senate?
A couple of years.
Yep. So you kept those contacts, and you had a good organization. You had a good organization in Abilene. And a lot of those, Scott Deezer and people like that, were people that were on the Board of Regents at Texas Tech, and you had worked with them, so you knew them. I did. All that helped. All the connections that I made at Texas Tech helped. But I'll tell you, there was the commander of the Air Force Base there, Michael Bob Starr. He also ran. And it's tough to run against a guy that's served in the military. I mean, he comes in with looking like Tom Cruise with his shades on and his bombardier jacket, and he talks about bombing terrorists. And this was at the height of, the radical Islamic terrorism, the rise of the caliphate and ISIS. And so, I was over there saying, I'm the son of a tractor salesman and a school teacher. And he's talking about bombing ISIS, and I'm thinking, golly, this is going to be tough to convince folks. He's a great American and patriot. We ended up being able to make it to the final two. I was second. We went into a runoff because nobody got more than 50% and was able to beat the current mayor at the time, 4 years, two-term mayor, and the rest is history. And all he
that
was a good candidate also.
Absolutely,
you had
tough guy.
Two real good candidates in there. And what's he doing now?
Michael Bob Starr was working for a nonprofit. Had international implications, and it was a service oriented. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but he's still involved in public service. I think he's left that foundation, and I don't know what he's doing now, but I did run into him the other day, and it's still a service oriented job. That's how he's wired. It's what I loved about him is that that's all he's ever known, because he's a guy that's his metric for success in life is what he's done in service to community and others. And so we've kept a great, friendship since then, and I love running into him.
We hope you've enjoyed part one of Chancellor Hance's conversation with Congressman Jodey Arrington, and ask you to check back later this week for part two.